Most people think Native Americans only used bows and arrows to hunt, but that's completely wrong. There were 7 hunting tools so deadly that early colonists actually banned them in certain territories. What made these weapons so terrifyingly effective? When most people think of ancient hunting weapons, they picture bows and arrows, maybe spears if they're feeling adventurous. But there's one Native American tool that makes a regular spear look like a pool noodle in a hurricane: the atlatl. Sounds like something you'd catch from a mosquito bite, right? Well, this spear thrower was actually the smartphone of prehistoric hunting technology. And just like your nephew trying to explain TikTok to you, it's more sophisticated than it first appears. Here's the deal. Your arm can only throw a spear so far before physics starts laughing at you. The atlatl basically gave hunters a mechanical advantage that would make a modern engineer jealous. Think of it as the world's first lever system designed specifically for ruining a mammoth's day. But here's where it gets wild. These things could launch spears at speeds up to 60 miles per hour. That's faster than most people drive through a school zone. And we're talking about a piece of carved wood and some serious engineering know-how. The beauty was in its simplicity. Picture a wooden extension of your arm, usually about 2 feet long, with a hook or socket at one end to hold the spear. When you throw, the atlatl acts like a catapult, multiplying the force and distance your arm alone could achieve. And let's talk distance for a second. A regular spear might travel 50 yards if you've got a good arm and favorable wind. An atlatl could send that same spear flying over 150 yards with deadly accuracy. Suddenly, that angry mastodon doesn't seem quite so intimidating when you're lobbing projectiles from 3 football fields away. Then there's the artistry angle that nobody mentions. These weren't just functional tools slapped together during commercial breaks. Many atlatls were intricately carved with animal figures, geometric patterns, and designs that would make modern woodworkers weep with envy. Hunters were literally carrying works of art into battle. The tactical advantage was enormous. Dangerous game like giant ground sloths or cave bears couldn't exactly charge you from 100 yards away before you got multiple shots off. It was like having a sniper rifle when everyone else was stuck with brass knuckles. What really blows my mind is that this technology predates the bow and arrow by thousands of years. While our ancestors were still figuring out fire, some genius was already engineering projectile multipliers that would remain virtually unchanged for millennia. And speaking of unchanged technology, there's another hunting tool that took a completely different approach to bringing down prey. Instead of throwing harder and farther, what if you could tangle up your target without ever getting close? Now here's where things get really interesting. The Bola might look like something a kid threw together with rocks and string, but don't let appearances fool you. This weapon was basically the Native American version of a high-tech capture system. 3 weighted balls connected by braided cords. Sounds simple, right? Well, try spinning that thing over your head and hitting a running rabbit at 20 yards. Your grandfather probably couldn't do it after practicing for months, and these hunters made it look easier than opening a pickle jar. The genius wasn't just in the design, it was in the physics. When you launch a Bola, those weighted ends spread out like an angry octopus, creating this spinning net of doom that wraps around anything it touches. Birds flying at full speed, tangled, prairie dogs darting between holes, caught. Even larger animals like deer would find their legs wrapped tighter than a Christmas present. But here's what makes the Bola truly brilliant. It was reusable ammunition. Unlike arrows that could break or get lost, you just unwrapped your Bola from whatever you caught and used it again. Talk about sustainable hunting technology. The weights themselves were works of art. Some tribes carved them from stone, others used clay, and the really fancy ones featured polished bone decorated with intricate patterns. These weren't just tools. They were status symbols that showed off a hunter's skill and creativity. And let's talk about versatility for a second. A skilled hunter could adjust their throwing technique based on the prey. Hunting small, quick birds, light weights with a faster spin, going after something bigger, heavier weights for more stopping power. It was like having an adjustable wrench, except this one caught dinner. The learning curve was steeper than a mountain goat trail, though. Young hunters spent years perfecting their technique, practicing on everything from fence posts to patient dogs. The timing had to be perfect. Release too early and you're hitting dirt, too late and you're wrapping yourself up like a human burrito. What really impressed me about bolas was their range. A good hunter could nail targets 30 to 40 yards away with deadly accuracy. That's like throwing a handful of rocks from your front door and hitting your mailbox, except the rocks are connected and your mailbox is running away. The psychological factor played a role too. Animals that escape Bola attacks rarely forgot the experience, making them warier and harder to hunt with traditional methods. Speaking of psychological warfare, wait until you hear about the next tool on our list. While bolas announced themselves with a distinctive whooshing sound, our next weapon was the complete opposite. So silent it could take down prey without alerting anything else in the area. Well, here's where things get really sneaky. The blowgun might look like nothing more than a hollow stick, but don't let that fool you. This thing was basically the stealth bomber of the hunting world. Native American hunters turned a simple tube into a precision instrument that could drop prey without making a sound. Think about it. No bowstring twang, no wood cracking, just a quiet puff of air and dinner's on the table. Your neighbor Bob with his leaf blower makes more noise than these ancient hunters ever did. But mastering the blowgun? That's where things got interesting. Hunters spent years perfecting their lung capacity and aim. Makes sense when you realize they needed to hit a moving rabbit from 30 feet away using nothing but breath control. Try holding your breath for more than a minute, and you'll appreciate what these folks could do. The real genius wasn't just in the tube itself. Native hunters crafted lightweight darts from materials you'd walk right past. Thin wood splinters, plant fibers, even porcupine quills. Each dart had to be perfectly balanced. Too heavy, and it drops like a rock. Too light, and the wind carries it into the next county. And the weird part is how they made these seemingly harmless projectiles absolutely lethal. Many tribes coated their darts with plant-based toxins that could paralyze or kill small game almost instantly. Suddenly, that innocent-looking reed becomes a lot more intimidating, doesn't it? Different tribes had their own blowgun styles, too. Some preferred longer tubes for maximum range. We're talking 8 feet or more. Others went compact for the easier forest navigation. The Cherokee made theirs from river cane, while tribes in the Pacific Northwest used elderberry wood. Each material gave different performance characteristics, like choosing between a sports car and an SUV. What really impressed me about blowgun hunting was the patience required. These hunters would sit motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect shot. No fidgeting, no checking their phones every 5 minutes like we do. Just pure focus and timing. The accuracy these hunters achieved was mind-blowing. Archaeological evidence shows they could consistently hit targets smaller than a playing card from considerable distances. Professional dart players today would be jealous of that precision. Then there is the versatility factor. Unlike other hunting tools that served one purpose, blowguns doubled as communication devices. Hunters could signal each other across distances without alerting prey. Pretty clever for a primitive tool, right? But even the most silent weapon needs the right technique to be truly effective. And that's where our next hunting tool takes a completely different approach. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most brutal. Now here's where things get beautifully simple. The rabbit stick might look like your grandfather's walking cane, but don't let appearances fool you. This curved piece of wood was the Swiss Army knife of hunting tools. If Swiss Army knives were designed to knock dinner unconscious, picture a boomerang that gave up its dreams of returning home. Instead, it focused entirely on one job, delivering a perfectly calculated bonk to unsuspecting small game. The genius wasn't in complexity, quite the opposite. While other hunters were fussing with arrows, strings, and intricate trap mechanisms, the rabbit stick guy just needed good aim and a decent throwing arm. But here's what made it brilliant. Unlike my neighbor's leaf blower that breaks every fall, the rabbit stick required zero maintenance. No strings to snap in cold weather, no delicate parts to worry about, and definitely no instruction manual thicker than a phone book. You carved it once, and it lasted years. The effectiveness was surprisingly brutal for something so simple. A well-thrown rabbit stick could drop a rabbit at 30 feet, stunning it instantly. The curved design created a wider strike zone than a straight stick, kind of like upgrading from a baseball bat to a cricket paddle, if cricket paddles flew through the air at unsuspecting animals. Smart hunters carved theirs from hardwood like oak or hickory. The weight had to be just right, too light, and it wouldn't pack enough punch. Too heavy and your throwing accuracy went out the window faster than a teenager's curfew promises. Most rabbit sticks weighed between 8 and 12 ounces, perfectly balanced for maximum impact. Then there's the versatility factor that would make any modern multi-tool jealous. Need to dig up roots? Rabbit stick. Want to knock fruit from high branches? Same tool. Have to poke something suspicious from a safe distance? You guessed it. It was like having a reliable friend who never complained about extra jobs. The learning curve was refreshingly reasonable too. Sure, becoming a rabbit stick master took practice, but you could become functional in weeks, not years. Compare that to mastering a bow, which required the patience of a saint and the dedication of someone training for the Olympics. Various tribes across North America used these wonderfully simple tools, from the southwestern deserts to the northern plains. Each region developed slightly different curves and weights based on local game, but the core principle remained unchanged. Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. Speaking of solutions that seemed almost too good to be true, wait until you discover how entire communities could feast without lifting a finger, thanks to an ingenious water-based trap that practically caught fish by itself. Ever watch those old Western movies where they build a fence to corral cattle? Well, Native Americans figured out the same concept worked brilliantly underwater. And honestly, it was probably way smarter than anything Hollywood ever dreamed up. Fish weirs transformed entire waterways into massive fishing machines. These weren't your average weekend fishing setups either. We're talking about sophisticated engineering projects that could feed entire villages for months. The beauty lay in their simplicity. Strategic barriers placed across streams that forced fish to swim exactly where hunters wanted them. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike that neighbor who always brags about catching one measly bass, these traps could capture hundreds of fish in a single run. The principle was pure genius. Create a funnel system that lets fish swim in easily, but makes escape nearly impossible. Kind of like a roach motel, but for salmon. The construction required serious teamwork and planning. Families would spend weeks selecting the perfect location, studying water flow patterns like ancient hydraulic engineers. They'd weave together branches, stones, and reeds to create these underwater mazes. The whole community got involved. Even the kids had jobs collecting materials. What really impressed me when I first learned about this was the sustainability angle. These weren't just grab-and-go operations that depleted fish populations. Smart hunters built adjustable sections that could be opened during spawning seasons, ensuring future generations of fish. And that's conservation thinking that puts most modern fishing practices to shame. The timing had to be perfect, too. Spring salmon runs meant feast or famine for many tribes. Miss the peak migration, and you're looking at a hungry winter, but nail it with a well-placed weir, and you've got enough smoked fish to last until the snow melts. Different tribes developed their own signature styles. Pacific Northwest groups created elaborate structures that looked like underwater cathedrals. Eastern tribes preferred simpler designs that could be quickly assembled and moved. Each approach reflected local conditions and available materials. Then there's the maintenance factor. These weren't set-it-and-forget-it devices. High water could wash away months of work in hours. Ice damage meant spring repairs. Beaver interference, and yes, that was apparently a real problem, required constant vigilance. The psychology behind weirs was fascinating too. Fish naturally follow current patterns and underwater guides. By reading these invisible highways, hunters could predict exactly where their dinner would swim. It was like having GPS for prehistoric fishing. What made weirs truly revolutionary was their passive nature. Once built, they worked around the clock without human intervention. While other hunting methods required active participation and perfect timing, weirs just sat there doing their job. Speaking of passive hunting methods, there's another technique that relied entirely on gravity and timing to do the heavy work. Want to catch dinner without being there when it happens? Welcome to the deadfall trap. Basically nature's version of setting a mouse trap, except this one's designed to flatten anything from rabbits to raccoons. And trust me, after you see how clever this contraption is, you'll never look at a pile of logs the same way again. The concept couldn't be simpler. Balance a heavy rock or log above an animal trail, set up a trigger mechanism that even your grandfather could understand, and wait for an unsuspecting critter to come along and, well, let's just say gravity always wins. But here's where things get interesting. The engineering behind these simple traps would make a modern physicist tip his hat. Native hunters didn't just drop rocks willy-nilly and hope for the best. They studied animal behavior like zoologists with PhD degrees, except their classroom was the wilderness and their textbook was pure survival instinct. These trap masters knew exactly where to place their deadfalls along well-worn animal paths, near water sources or close to food caches where animals felt most comfortable. The trigger systems? Absolutely brilliant. Some used the classic figure 4 configuration, 3 sticks arranged in a delicate balance that would collapse faster than a house of cards in a windstorm when disturbed. Others employed the Paiute deadfall, which sounds fancy but basically means the trap was so sensitive it could be triggered by a butterfly landing wrong. Then there's the split-stick deadfall, my personal favorite for sheer ingenuity. This design uses a notched stick that holds everything in place until the animal moves the bait. It's like watching a Rube Goldberg machine, except instead of dropping a marble into a bucket, you're dropping a 20-pound boulder onto your next meal. But here's what really separates the pros from the amateurs: understanding seasonal patterns. Smart hunters knew that desperate winter animals would take bigger risks for food, while spring creatures were more cautious with plenty of options available. They adjusted their trap sensitivity accordingly, kind of like fine-tuning a vintage radio to get the clearest signal. The beauty of deadfall traps wasn't just their effectiveness, it was their sustainability. No ammunition required, no fancy materials needed, and they could be reset dozens of times using the same components. Plus, they worked around the clock without coffee breaks or bathroom stops. Most impressive? These traps could be sized for everything from field mice to deer. Bigger game just meant bigger rocks and stronger trigger mechanisms. The physics remained the same, but the impact, well, that scaled up accordingly. Speaking of impact, wait until you discover how Native Americans revolutionized long-distance hunting with a weapon that combined natural materials in ways that would change warfare forever. When most people think of Native American hunting tools, the bow and arrow immediately comes to mind. But here's what your history teacher probably never told you. These weren't just simple wooden sticks with strings attached. The craftsmanship behind these weapons was so sophisticated, it makes modern engineering look like child's play. Native American bows were masterpieces of biomechanics. Craftsmen would spend months selecting the perfect wood, usually yew, Osage orange, or hickory. Then comes the real magic. They'd back these bows with sinew from animals like deer or elk. Think of sinew as nature's version of carbon fiber, but actually better in some ways. Here's where it gets interesting. The sinew wasn't just glued on like some weekend warrior's DIY project. Skilled bowyers would meticulously layer and stretch the sinew while it was wet, then let it dry and shrink. This created a composite bow with incredible tensile strength. We're talking about weapons that could launch arrows at over 90 miles per hour, faster than most people drive through school zones these days. But wait, there's more to this story. The arrows themselves were engineering marvels. Different tribes developed specialized arrowhead designs for specific purposes. Broadheads for large game that would cause massive bleeding. Blunt points for small game to avoid damaging valuable fur. Some even had detachable heads that would stay in the animal while the shaft fell away, preventing the prey from using branches to scrape off the arrow. What really sets these bows apart from modern hunting equipment? Reliability. No moving parts to break, no batteries to die, no complicated maintenance schedules. A well-made Native American bow could last decades with minimal care. Try saying that about your smartphone or laptop. The accuracy these hunters achieved was legendary. Stories tell of warriors who could split their own arrows Robin Hood style, though they probably had better things to do with their expensive ammunition. More practically, a skilled archer could consistently hit targets at distances that would make modern bow hunters jealous. And here's something that might surprise you. The bow and arrow technology was so effective that it led to significant social changes. Tribes could hunt more efficiently, which meant more reliable food sources. This allowed for larger, more permanent settlements. In many ways, the perfection of bow technology was a cornerstone of Native American civilization. The next time someone dismisses ancient technology as primitive, remind them that these simple tools required knowledge of physics, chemistry, biology, and material science that took generations to perfect. Sometimes the old ways weren't just good, they were better.